I want to talk to you tonight about something that I think most Americans aren't paying enough attention to. And I say that with no disrespect because I know people are worried about their grocery bills. They're watching gas prices climb every single week. They're trying to figure out how to make things work at home. I understand that I've been there, but here's what I need you to understand. Right now, today, April the 10th, 2026, something is unfolding in Islamabad, Pakistan that will shape American foreign policy, our constitutional system of governance, and the global balance of power for decades to come. And most people don't even realize it's happening. Vice President J.D. Vance is boarding Air Force Two as we speak, heading to lead the most consequential direct engagement between the United States and Iran since the Islamic Revolution of 1979. Now, think about that for a moment. Since 1979, the most direct contact we'd ever had was when President Obama called President Rouhani in 2013. And even that was just a phone call. This is face to face. This is real. And I want you to pay attention. Not because I'm trying to score political points, not because I want to take a side, but because as the former president of the United States, I believe I have a responsibility to help people understand what's at stake when decisions of this magnitude are being made. Now, who's at the table? Who's not at the table? And what was never voted on by your elected representatives in Congress. Those details tell you more about this moment than any handshake or headline ever will. And we'll come back to that in a moment. But let me be clear right up front. This is not normal, and we should not treat it as normal. Now, let me walk you through how we got here because the chain of events matters enormously. On February 28th of this year, the United States and Israel launched coordinated military strikes against Iran. Operation Epic Fury, they called it. Those strikes killed Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, and they set off a war that has now raged for 6 weeks across multiple countries. Thousands of people have been killed. The entire Middle East has been destabilized. And here at home, Americans are paying the price at the pump every single day. Iran responded by effectively shutting down the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway through which 20% of the world's oil supply flows during peacetime. When that strait closed, global energy markets went into a tailspin. Brent crude surged past 120 a barrel. Gas prices in the United States saw their largest monthly jump in 60 years, 21.2% in March alone. The CPI report released just today shows inflation has spiked to 3.3%, driven almost entirely by energy costs from this war. That's not abstract economics. That is real pain for real families. The war spread to Lebanon, where Israel intensified its strikes against Hezbollah. Over 200 people were killed in a single day of bombing this week. And through it all, your Congress, the people's representatives, never authorized this war. There was no formal declaration, no vote. Democrats tried 4 separate times to pass a war powers resolution. Republicans blocked it every single time. That detail matters more than people think, and I'll explain why. What Pakistan did was remarkable. It positioned itself as a trusted intermediary, brokered a fragile 2-week ceasefire announced on April 7th, and set the stage for these talks. But a ceasefire is not peace, and these talks carry the weight of everything that's gone wrong. Now, let me tell you something about how serious diplomacy is supposed to work, because what I'm about to describe is frankly a mess. The United States presented Iran with a 15-point framework. It demanded an end to all uranium enrichment on Iranian soil, the full reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, the dismantlement of Iran's proxy networks, Hezbollah, the Houthis, militias in Iraq, and strict missile limitations. Iran looked at that and called it maximalist. They rejected it. Iran came back with a 10-point counterproposal. It demanded U.S. non-aggression guarantees, international recognition of Iran's right to enrich uranium for civilian purposes, continued Iranian control over the Strait of Hormuz, including reports of $2 million transit fees per vessel, the lifting of all sanctions, and compensation for war damages. Now, here's where things start to get complicated. President Trump called Iran's 10-point plan a workable basis on which to negotiate. Those were his words. But then within hours, his own team contradicted him. Vice President Vance said the original version was fundamentally unserious and literally thrown in the garbage. He dismissed the published version, suggesting it was written by ChatGPT and attributed to, in his words, a random Yahoo in Iran. The Persian and English versions of Iran's proposal reportedly differ on the critical enrichment clause. So, You've got at least three different drafts floating around, the White House contradicting itself within the same news cycle, and Iran's parliament speaker, Kalibab, demanding that $120 in frozen Iranian assets be released before negotiations even begin, a precondition that appeared in no ceasefire agreement. Let me tell you something. When I was involved in the JCPOA framework, the Iran nuclear deal that took years of painstaking work across multiple administrations, we had teams of career diplomats, nuclear physicists, legal scholars, and intelligence professionals working line by line, word by word. That's how you handle this. Not with contradictory tweets and thrown away drafts. Now, look, let me get to something that really concerns me. And I want to be careful here because I'm not questioning anyone's patriotism. I'm questioning the structure of this negotiation. Vice President J.D. Vance is leading the American delegation to Islamabad. He's a man who served honorably in the Marines, served 2 years in the United States Senate, and has been vice president for a little over a year. But let me be direct. He has limited diplomatic experience. He has never been involved in negotiations of this magnitude. He said so himself. His words were, quote, "My key role was I sat on the phone a lot." He's joined by Steve Witkoff, President Trump's special envoy, and Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law. Now, the Iranians have indicated through multiple channels, according to Reuters and other reporting, that they specifically wanted Vance at the table. They view him as the most anti-war figure in Trump's inner circle, someone more inclined to negotiate in good faith. That tells you something important about the dynamic. And here's who's not there. Secretary of State Marco, the nation's top diplomat, is conspicuously absent. There's been no announcement of career Foreign Service officers, regional experts, intelligence briefers, or legal advisors on the delegation. Compare that to the Iranian side. Foreign Minister Arachi, Parliament Speaker Kalibab, a former Revolutionary Guard commander, the Secretary of the Supreme National Security Council, the central bank governor, and several members of parliament. That is a full institutional delegation. Bloomberg ran a headline this week. J.D. Vance gets his big moment leading peace talks with Iran. I have to ask the uncomfortable question. Is this a serious diplomatic mission or is this a political audition for 2028? Because in my experience, and I've been around a few negotiations in my time, when you send a team built for headlines, you get headlines. When you send a team built for results, you get results. Now, this is where I need you to really stay with me. Because what I'm about to say goes beyond any one president, any one party, or any one negotiation. This is about the architecture of American self-governance. A war was launched on February 28th without congressional authorization. No declaration of war, no authorization for use of military force. Democrats in the House and Senate tried 4 times to invoke the War Powers Act. The law passed in 1973 specifically to prevent this kind of unilateral military action. Republicans blocked every attempt. And now the executive branch is negotiating a peace to a war that was never legally declared. Think about what that means. The American people, through their elected representatives, were never asked whether they wanted this war. And now they're not being asked about the terms of its resolution. I know something about this. When I made decisions about the use of force in Kosovo, in Iraq, and Sudan, I understood that even when a president pushes the boundaries of executive authority, there's a constitutional framework that demands respect. Congress has a voice. The people have a voice. That's not a technicality. That's the foundation of this republic. Here's what concerns me most. If this model works, launch a war unilaterally, negotiate peace unilaterally, bypass Congress entirely, it becomes the template. Not just for this president, for every future president of either party. A Democratic president could do the same thing 4 years from now, and there would be nothing to stop them because the precedent will have been set. The Constitution doesn't have a party. It has a purpose. And that purpose is to make sure that the most consequential decisions a nation can make, war and peace, belong to all of us, not to one person in the Oval Office. This should be a bipartisan concern. I'm not saying it to attack anyone. I'm saying it because I've sat in that chair and I know how tempting it is to act alone. And I know why the founders made sure we couldn't. Let me tell you something that most people covering this story won't say out loud, but every political strategist in Washington is thinking about it right now. J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio are the 2 leading contenders for the 2028 Republican presidential nomination. Rubio, as Secretary of State, was initially the administration's most prominent foreign policy voice. But now Vance has been handed the marquee diplomatic assignment, the one the whole world is watching. If these talks succeed and Vance brings home even the framework of a deal, he becomes a statesman overnight. He becomes the man who ended the war. That's a powerful narrative for a presidential campaign. But if the talks fail, it's a ceasefire collapses, it's a Strait stays closed. If gas prices keep climbing, Vance inherits the blame for a war that's already costing Americans at the pump every single day. Trump himself noted that Vance was less enthusiastic about the war than other senior officials. That makes Vance either the perfect peace negotiator or, and I hate to say this, a convenient scapegoat. Now, here's the Democratic dilemma, and I want to be honest about it. If Democrats oppose the war, they risk looking unpatriotic. If they support the talks, they risk giving Trump a diplomatic victory heading into the midterms. I think both of those instincts are wrong. What Democrats should do, and what any responsible opposition should do, is focus not on partisan scorekeeping, but on process, accountability, and constitutional governance. The question isn't whether we want peace. Of course, we want peace. The question is whether we're building a peace that's durable, transparent, and democratically legitimate. And I'll flag one more thing. Reports from Reuters and multiple regional officials suggest that Iran specifically wanted Vance at the table because of his skepticism about military intervention. They believe he's more inclined toward concessions. Now, whether that's true or not, the perception alone shapes the negotiation. And when the other side thinks they've chosen your negotiator, that's a dynamic that any experienced diplomat would tell you is deeply concerning. Now, let me try to do what I always try to do as president. Look ahead, be honest with you, and lay out what I think is most likely to happen. I see 3 roads out of Islamabad this weekend. Scenario 1, a framework deal. Both sides agree to a broad outline. Maybe they defer the hardest issues, enrichment levels, Hezbollah, the frozen assets, to future rounds of negotiation. The ceasefire holds, the strait partially reopens, oil markets stabilize somewhat. Both Trump and Iran's leaders claim victory. Now, I think this is the most likely outcome, but I want to be clear. A framework deal is not a peace deal. It would be fragile, full of unresolved contradictions, and it could collapse within weeks. We saw that pattern with the original ceasefire. It was announced on April 7th, and within 48 hours, both sides were already disputing its terms. A deal that papers over fundamental disagreements is a ticking clock, not a resolution. Scenario 2, the talks collapse. The Lebanon issue proves insurmountable, or the enrichment red line, or Iran's demand for $120 billion in frozen assets. The ceasefire expires on April 22nd. Trump faces a decision. Resume bombing or escalate rhetoric without action. Either path has catastrophic consequences. Inflation spikes further. Global markets panic. America's credibility as a negotiating partner takes another hit. Scenario 3, and this is the one I worry about most, a muddled middle. The talks don't formally collapse, but they produce no agreement. Both sides agree to extend the ceasefire and continue talking. They kick the can down the road. There's no resolution on the strait, on enrichment, on Lebanon, or on sanctions. This is the most dangerous outcome because it creates the illusion of progress while solving nothing. And the longer the strait remains partially closed, the deeper the economic damage, not just to America, but to the entire global economy. By honest assessment, I believe we'll see something between scenario 1 and scenario 3. A vague framework that both sides can spin as progress with the real decisions postponed. And that means this crisis isn't ending this weekend, it's just entering a new phase. Let me close with this. I have always believed, and I believed it when I was in office, and I believe it today, that peace is preferable to war, always. And if Vice President Vance succeeds in moving toward a genuine, durable resolution in Islamabad, I will be the first to commend the effort because I'm an American before I'm a Democrat. But here's the honest truth. How we make peace matters as much as whether we make peace. A deal negotiated in secret, without congressional input, without allied consultation, without transparency to the American people, built on a war that was never authorized by those same people, that's not a peace that strengthens American democracy. It's a precedent that weakens it. I'm calling on Congress, both parties, Republicans and Democrats alike, to demand a role in any agreement that comes out of these talks. The Constitution requires it. The American people deserve it. I'm calling on the media to scrutinize the details, not just the drama, to ask hard questions about enrichment clauses and enforcement mechanisms, not just about who shook whose hand. And I'm calling on the American people to pay attention because what's decided in Islamabad this weekend will affect gas prices, national security, constitutional governance, and America's place in the world for years to come. The hardest thing I learned as president was not how to make peace. Getting people to the table, that's the relatively easy part. The hard part, the really hard part, is making a peace that lasts. A peace that holds up when the cameras are gone, when the negotiators go home, when the next crisis hits, and everyone forgets the promises that were made. And the only way you do that, the only way you build something that endures, is if the whole country is behind it. Not just one man, not just one party, not just one weekend in Islamabad. All of us together, we can still get this right, but only if we insist on doing it the right way